Hello and welcome back to Hoi 4, Equestria War, the Griffonian Empire, under Emperor Grover V. Oh, he has a description. Grover of Griffinstone, sixth of his name, Emperor of all Griffins, ascended to the throne at the age of 18, and like his father, who was denied the coronation by his royal council, Grover VI regent allowed him to be crowned as soon as he came of age. Already his reign appears much more promising than his father's. He is healthy, the empire has been rebuilt, subversion and traitorous movements have been crushed, and the light of Boros shines upon Griffonia. But will he be able to keep Griffinkind united? That will be the greatest challenge of his life, and he must dedicate himself to it fully. Without the idol of Boros, it may not even be possible to keep the Griffins united under one banner. Only time will tell if his upbringing was good enough to prepare him for the hardships ahead. And now we begin, and we will hear them out. I'm a troll. Hear them out. The protesters are right. Radical reform is needed now that the Empire's been reunited. The bloated military-industrial complex and wartime quotas have no reason to exist, and the loyal subjects of the Empire deserve to have their voices heard. Man, I think time's moving a bit slower now with how late into the game we are, but, you know, whatever. It's fine. Oh, yeah. Or you could just, you know, completely reform, make things better. That's right. We're going to change things for the better. Probably for some stupid equestrian, like, you know, they're probably convincing us to do this. But hey. The Griffenheim protest. Soon after protests began, the police in the Imperial City began to restore law and order in the streets. Tensions were high between the students and the riot police, especially when some protesters saw this as proof of the Emperor's tyranny. This is why they were very surprised when official Imperial decree ordered the police to stand down and leave the protesters alone. In Grover's eyes, the protesters were almost entirely peaceful and non-violent, so he did not see them as a threat, unlike some of his advisors. Violence would only beget violence, so leaving them alone would ensure they remained calm. He even made a statement promising to listen to the demonstrators' demands, as long as they remained reasonable, and said force would not be used against them unless they were to use it first. This proved to be effective, as the rare violent incidents and clashes became even rarer. It's a peaceful protest. What's wrong about that? True. So true. Recall the Reich Army. Ever since the protester began, the army has been on standby, preparing to step in if any signs of any imminent revolution were to appear. The patrolling soldiers and armed vehicles have made our subjects rather uneasy, so now the Emperor has decided to order them to return to their barracks. This is good. This is good. We're doing good here. So yes, our entire empire is like about to be finished being given infrastructure. The entirety of it. Are we missing any random province? Oh, yep. Grab you two up. Oh, nope, gotta have you, and you gotta have you. Nope. The Reich Army recalled. To further calm and reassure the protesters, today His Majesty recalled all army units from protest sites across the Empire. They were on high alert, ready to interfere if necessary to prevent a revolution, and the roaring tanks patrolling the streets made many protesters both afraid and furious. So when the tanks and marching columns of soldiers returned to their barracks, the soldiers rejoiced. While some advisors expressed their concern that now the Empire was vulnerable to an organized revolution, the Emperor called them paranoid and reassured them that it would be fine. Indeed, the protests remained calm on the following days, with no sign of escalation of violence or preparation for a coup as well. See, nothing bad happened. Talk with the leaders. While the protests started without much organization, the students have flocked beyond prominent reformists and Democrats with political experience. Many of them were once our enemies. Perhaps reconciliation is in order so that we can live together in peace. Woo, peace! No, these islands need some infrastructure. Aha. You guys need infrastructure. Anyone else missing infrastructure? Doesn't seem like it. But if I see anyone missing infrastructure... Ah! Wait. No, that has all the infrastructure. Yeah, I think we're good. The talks. A dozen leaders of the student movements from all across Griffonia received a letter today, which did not contain poison or a bomb like they expected. Instead, it was an official invitation to meet the Emperor himself at the Imperial Palace in Griffinstone. While a few suspected a trap and a plot to arrest them, most of them trusted the young Grover and traveled to the capital. For some, it was a very lengthy journey, but they were determined to go nonetheless. There, His Majesty treated them like honored guests, welcoming them to his home and offering them a bountiful dinner. 6 leaders in total had arrived. Cecile Gradu from Aquilia, Giovanni di Gospelini from Wingbardi, Barad Griffkiskai from Griffia, Heinrich Kingfeather from Cloudbury, Winston Copperhill from Bronze Crest, and Alex D. Sycamore. While their values varied, they all agreed that the Empire needed democratic reform and acknowledged Grover VI as their rightful monarch. After the dinner, the Emperor talked to them all in private, where they elaborated upon the goals of the student movement and their demands. While Grover reassured them that no harm would come to them if they did not resort to violence, they all agreed it was out of the question, and that another bloody revolution would bring nothing but death. Peaceful reform was the way, and they convinced the Emperor that this would satisfy them and the protesters. While some of their demands were too extreme for Grover, he was convinced of the more moderate and reasonable requests. At the end of the meeting, he swore in the name of his father to implement these reforms and do what Grover 6 could not: save the Empire from revolutionary chaos, turmoil, and war. All 6 leaders left the palace satisfied, dreaming of a blissful future for the Empire and its people. They seem like reasonable folks. Allow coverage. So far, there has been strict censorship on the news coverage of the protests, both domestically and abroad. This allows for vicious rumors to spread, some even claiming that innocent civilians are being gunned down in Griffonheim. These lies can be stopped by revealing the truth to all. Sure. I'd say things are going pretty dang well. What are you doing over there? I don't care about you. You just get deleted. Nobody cares about you. The reports. Soon after lifting the censorship on the news coverage of the protest, the front page of every single regional newspaper, as well as the national newspaper Burger, was filled with sensational headlines and numerous pictures depicting the protest. In the Burger, a lengthy editorial contemplated if the Empire would accept the students' demands or spiral into chaos and revolution. Some articles highlighted the wrongdoings by the police and military before they had been ordered to stand down, and a satirical caricature depicted Grover as a confused crying child in a burning house. Regional newspapers had different views on the matters. Le Petit Griffin saw this as a chance to secure autonomy for Aquilia, which the Aquilian kingdom had had before its secession from the Empire. Campi di Talacana claimed that a parliamentary monarch was inevitable and that the Empire would introduce local democratic governments similar to the ones Equestria had. Emphasis on had. Fugu el der Warhet, a newspaper, had once been the most popular one in Griffonia, before being suppressed by the Burgher after the Empire's reunification. Even had a scandalous headline claiming the Emperor would soon abdicate and be succeeded by a republican government. However, some newspapers espoused support for the Emperor. The Prywinian Campu Penny Liber, always a staunch supporter of the De Casa dynasty, was confident His Majesty would soon crush the resistance, having lulled the protesters into a false sense of security, while withdrawing the army and police. Yep, that's what I'm doing, definitely, I'm sure. Yep, keep supporting me. While the coverage had been largely negative, the Emperor Grover believes the journalists deserve to have their opinions heard. Already heated debate has begun across the Empire about his fate, without realizing it, the subjects of the Empire happily embracing a freedom of speech. See, nothing bad happened. For a better tomorrow. The protests remain calm, and there is no threat of revolution. Yet, nevertheless, His Majesty plans to accept most of the demands of the student movement. His motive is not to end the resistance, but to reform the Empire into a more democratic nation that genuinely cares for its subjects. Woo! That's our Emperor. That's our Emperor. He's also, our Emperor's also really into infrastructure. Like, really, really into infrastructure. But hey, you know, it's helping out. The reforms of Grover VI. Today marks the beginning of a new age for the Empire. His Majesty Grover VI passed his initial reforms, which primarily focused on establishing the foundation for future change. Most notably, he dismissed advisors who had previously opposed a conciliatory stance with the protesters, and greatly reduced the power of the nobles' council to the point there was very little they could do to influence governance and legislation. Many of the peers protested this act, given that the council had performed with admirable dedication and little to no scandal. But the Emperor cared little. But when they threatened to tell the old Duchess that her nephew was slandering the noble Griffs who worked so hard to raise Grover to the throne, he responded that the nobles served the Empire, and not the other way around. Other smaller reforms included legalization protests of all kinds, prohibiting censorship, forbidding religious officials from participating in government, allowing all religions and sects except for Marites, who remained banned, and recognizing every single regional language spoken within the Empire. To a better future, we make the Grover reforms. As Grover VI's reign begins truly, work has begun towards his first policies. The Imperial Palace is abuzz with the constant passage of advisors, jurists, politicians, and experts consulted by the Emperor. The world watches, eager to see what new policies and rules the young Emperor will implement. And by world, they mean my nation and Zebrakai. So this will remove the Industrial Advisory Council. It'll remove this. And, you know, we'll go back to civilian economy. You know, it's time to... And not yet. Let's work on political reforms first. Support the Volksfront. The Vox Front has some years now been a banned political organization whose members were hounded as Republican sympathizers and traitors. Now His Majesty has decided to lift the ban and pardon the members of the party because the only crime they committed was advocating liberty. Woo! That's our monarch. That's our emperor. That's just the slogan of the new reforms is just, that's our emperor. That's the slogan. I know, great slogan they came up with. It's real big, you know. Everyone's gonna love it. I mean, can you think of a better one? No, you obviously can't. A meeting with Van Cleef. So far, Edwin Van Cleef, the leader of the underground Volksfront and a stonemason by trade, has been distrustful of Grover VI. He had been invited to a meeting with the Emperor like other prominent protest leaders, but refused it, thinking it was a plot to imprison him for his old attempts of terrorism. When His Majesty officially pardoned him alongside Volksfront members, he was positively surprised and decided to trust the Emperor for now. This is why he cautiously accepted a second invitation to meet Emperor in person. This time without anyone else. Even when it was just the two of them inside Grover's office, he still glanced behind his back, fearing guards to burst inside to arrest him. But the Emperor reassured him with calming words and promises of peace. Indeed, Edwin let his guard down and talked with the Emperor for hours about the future of the Empire. While Grover refused any request for abdication and full tradition to democracy, he was willing to form a parliament like Van Cleef proposed, and to implement local democratic rule in the region of the Empire. When the meeting ended, it was past midnight, with both parties satisfied and looking forward to future cooperation. What a pleasant fellow. Yay! Separate temples in the state. The influence of the Archonate of Boros has always been strong in Griffonheim, but this influence kept growing until the line between the three temples and the Empire itself became blurry. The Emperor has decreed that this must change, so religious authorities become humble servants of the people. That makes sense. I agree with that one. Wait, I am American, so shocker. No, we're gonna have elections instead of whatever this thing is. Crush those foolish cars for democracy. No! What's wrong with you? What's wrong with this guy? Whoever this guy is. We're pushing for these new reforms. They're gonna help our empire in the long run. Doesn't this weirdo understand? Gosh. The separation of temples and states. His Majesty has decided to continue his reforms, which limited the power of the three temples. However, he has taken a more cautious approach to the matter. The influence of the priesthood has already been diminished due to the actions of former Regent Gabriella Eagleclaw, who has a personal grudge with the late Archon of Boros, the 7th, I think. Thus, it meant that the triarchy political power was non-existent, and the many knightly orders who were pledged to Archons have been integrated into the Reich Army. Not every Griff was satisfied with the situation, particularly the God-fearing Griffins. And the Emperor has decided to allow the temples to hold limited, if ineffectual, power within their area. And it was made particularly clear that this once influential Griffins of Flav would never hold considerable any sway within the state's apparatus. It needed to be done. Defining the Kaiser's authority. Ever since Grover I, the Emperor's authority was assumed to be absolute or non-existent, depending on the Emperor. None dared to speak against Grover II in fear of violent death, while everyone conspired against poor Grover V. This fluctuation must end once and for all. Grover VI shall be neither absolute nor a puppet. He will just be Grover VI. I actually have never, I've played the Griffonian Empire but I didn't read the events before. But this part of the tree, I've never seen this. I actually learned about it. Like, the reason I decided to do this series, actually, is because I found out this focus tree existed. I was like, wait, they have another focus tree that appears later? I'm doing this for my YouTube. I need to check this out, and I'm going to do it for YouTube, because why not make it a YouTube video? To better define the Kaiser's authority and create clear limits for it, His Majesty has formalized a separation of powers in the government. 3 separate bodies exist: the Emperor himself, the Imperial Parliament, and the Courts of Law in Griffinstone. Each branch would have separate responsibilities and powers, and would be capable of keeping the power of the other 2 in check. No longer could the Emperor pass legislation without approval from Parliament and the judiciary. Neither could the other 2 do the same if the Emperor were to veto their decision. Thus, a balance would be achieved in governance. Grover VI had given up his near-absolute power, but had also prevented having the fate of the unfortunate father befall either himself or any of his descendants. The Legionary Council would rule on the Emperor's behalf, but now it would not be able to do anything without getting approval from the Parliament and the courts. Never again would a small number of individuals be able to cause such widespread damage, which included the Emperor himself. The Kaiser is not always right. The Imperial Constitution. The Emperor desires to go one step further from simply defining the limits of his powers. He wishes to draft an official constitution for the Empire, first of its kind, which will define new democratic bodies of government to rule alongside the Emperor. It will also introduce something truly groundbreaking: universal suffrage for all citizens. Woo! Now that's our Emperor, or Kaiser. And that was the worst woman voice I did yet. That sounded more like a baby voice. The Grover reforms turn into the Grover Constitution, and we remove our expanded Mythos, which is our spy system that we never used. I have no agency, so with spies. I mean, yeah, we might as well remove it. It's just a waste of money. After much work and consultation, the new Imperial Constitution has been released. The basic law for Griffonian rights or Equestria, and a work of compromise with the opposition forces, one that may stand the test of time and will bring about peace in our institutions. Woo! Forgive and forget. After the revolution of 978, thousands of political prisoners have languished in detention, and the imperial unification only swelled to this number, with countless prisoners of wars and resistance members. Now His Majesty has ordered the immediate pardon and release of those who once saw him as their enemy. And this is beautiful. Freedom for all. Yesterday, across the Empire, crowds formed near the numerous prisons and internment camps which held political prisoners. The crowds primarily consisted of relatives, friends, and allies of the prisoners, but also news reporters, curious onlookers, and armed guards. They had gathered there to witness the liberation of thousands of political prisoners who had been imprisoned during the reunification wars, though some had been imprisoned since the revolution in 978. When the gates opened and flocked of the former prisoners finally came pouring out, their loved ones rushed to meet them, and the cameras of the reporters flashed constantly, capturing the emotional moments. One example of such moment was a 60-year-old veteran NRP member embracing his grandchildren, having been in prison ever since the revolution. Some of the prisoners were of course dangerous terrorists, but the guards made sure they would cause no trouble. This morning, the front pages of all newspapers displayed the pictures, most of them praising the Emperor for his mercy and kindness. However, some newspapers, such as the Campupainly Liber of Prywin, criticized the act, especially as the prisons in Prywin had now released thousands of communist PCP members. They predicted a sharp rise in terrorism and acts of sabotage. His Majesty, however, was confident that his kindness would only be repaid with kindness and not with violence. No Griffin deserved to be imprisoned for their political beliefs or their brave resistance against the despotic regime. If he offered the prisoners what they desired, reforms and freedom, then why would they resist him? Hopefully this won't cause any issues. Judging by how it increased instability, it looks like it won't. Unban regional parties. The regent was determined from the very beginning to make the empire far more centralized than it had been before, refusing to allow nations such as the Kingdom of Quillia and the Kingdom of Wingbardy to even exist. But the Emperor says there's no need to be so extreme, and that regionalists won't rebel, but loyal subjects who simply desire aren't rebels, but loyal subjects who simply desire more autonomy. Here, let's just give our little subjects that already have more autonomy, support. Let's just support them, give them, care. And also build some stuff for us. Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. That's good. And, okay. Liberty for all. During the Regency, the Regent had banned all regionalists and nationalist organization and forced them into hiding in order to curtail organized resistance in occupied regions. Their members were persecuted and suspected of being traitors and rebels who wished to liberate their homelands once more from the Empire. A while has passed since the reunification was achieved, yet these underground resistance cells continue to exist. Instead of vainly wasting more Griffin power and resources to hunt them down, Grover the Sixth has instead decided to lift the ban and pardon the members of the organization. Indeed, they will now be allowed to form proper political parties to advocate for regional autonomy, though independence will remain out of the question. Most members of these parties have happily welcomed the news, but some more fanatic nationalists, such as the Leonard Radir of Aquilia and the Giulio Beccalini of Wingbardy, either remain skeptical or continue to demand full independence. His Majesty believes they too will calm down in time, once he passes further reforms. Don't get too rowdy now. No, I'm not trying to annex you. But I think this is a good time to go ahead and end this episode. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell button. And as always, peace.